The Goths could have come from southern Scandinavia and lived around the lower Vistula river. They were the sons of Goths and were formerly known as the Teutons. The meaning of the word Goth has been generally accepted to translate into "too poor." Experts speculate that they could have gotten their name from a flood that forced them to migrate south from Scandinavia. Other possible translations are men, seed spreaders, stallions, or born and bred in the north. The Goths had a unique style to their culture, a more equal family lineage type called bilingual, where both genders inherited equally. Families would marry each other and give gifts. Over time, these gifts came in the way of alliances. This allowed for the Goths to unite in a way that other Germanic tribes struggled to do, turning them into a powerhouse. The Goths would raid into Rome. The first recorded was in 238 AD, with Rome bribing them to leave them alone. However, this only encouraged more raiding once the treaties were expired. The Goths would also use the Black Sea to raid many ports along the empire, causing much chaos. Rome at this point was undergoing internal struggles, and many Germanic tribes used this to take advantage. The Romans were impressed by the Goths, and over time subjugated many Gothic kings, but this only built up their prestige and allowed them to thrive from Roman funding and military tactics. Rome did this to defend their border. The Romans basically funded the Goths to act as their border security. But by 320 AD, the Goths had grown into an enormous power that even the Romans feared, and they were right on their border. The Romans therefore enacted preemptive strikes, ending Goth relationships with Rome and weakening them. However, there was a new rising power, the Huns, who had defeated some Gothic kings by 370 AD. A race of men Heathrow unknown had now arisen from a hidden nook of the earth, like a tempest of snows from the high mountains, and was seizing or destroying everything in its way. This would lead to a major split in Gothic culture. The Eastern Goths, who became Hun subjects and absorbed some Hun culture, became the Ostrogoths, while the Goths and some other Germanic tribes who chose to flee to the west became the Visigoths. Around 90,000 Goth refugees asked Rome if they could join their empire, and Rome would accept, offering them land to settle as their subjects. But the Romans took advantage of these Goths and didn't treat them equally. The Goths, for example, were forced to sell their children for rotten dog meat or starve. This caused unrest and rebellion, forcing many battles and skirmishes, with the Goths coming out on top, but they were pushed back to their border by the Black Sea. As the Goths raided, their army swelled with numbers from freed slaves, prisoners, and Roman traitors. The Eastern Roman Emperor, Valens, sent for help from the west. The forces would meet up around Adrianople, an important city to supply for their route to Constantinople. Emperor Valens would also bring with him the Roman armies defending the Persian border to the east. However, due to other Germanic tribes raiding in the west, the western armies would be delayed. Emperor Valens of the Eastern Empire was leading the force himself, and decided to attack the Goths without waiting for his western counterpart. This was incredibly risky, as the Goths had outmaneuvered the Romans and held the outskirts of Adrianople. Along with Germanic slaves and some other Germanic warriors who'd joined them, the Goths had formed a mighty army of around 12 to 15,000, while the Roman army was around 15 to 30,000 strong. The two sides stood negotiating. The Goths prolonged the battle to wait for more of their allies to arrive, and Rome was wary to attack due to the Goths' superior position atop a hill. During these negotiations, the Roman army was exposed to sunlight of around 40 degrees in their armour. These negotiations were cut short due to Roman cavalry positioning a bit too near to the Goths, causing the Goths to charge and attack them. The Roman cavalry retreated at once. The Roman historian Arminius stated their retreat was as cowardly as their advance was rash. At this moment, the Goth allies had arrived, possibly hiding out of sight and mistaking this for the start of the battle. These allies were 10,000 cavalry consisting of Goths and Eastern nomadic Alans, also known as Huns. third of the Roman cavalry marched at the Goth cavalry to attempt to save the fleeing, but were too late, and were now stuck in a skirmish. Seeing this sudden advantage, the Goths marched down from the hill at the Roman army that was still not fully in formation. They simply charged down the hill in a stereotypical barbarian horde. The Roman cavalry were doing a good job, pushing the Germanic cavalry back to their supplies. However, due to an unknown reason, many started to flee, possibly just losing control of their horses who were getting scared. This caused the remaining Romans to be slaughtered by the German cavalry, who came out on top. This allowed for the German cavalry to be able to charge into the Roman left flank. Many of this cavalry were also javelin throwers and were able to get in a good position behind their German allies. Many of the Romans fled, leaving only the most experienced still fighting. Even Emperor Valens' bodyguards fled, forcing him to seek safety in the middle of the battle. This led the Emperor and the top Roman warriors fighting on their own. Emperor Valens ordered his right flank to charge in and help, but they instead fled, along with the top Roman generals. Emperor Valens was either struck by a javelin here and died with the rest of the Roman forces, or was carried away to safety, only for the Germans to burn down his encampment later on, killing him. 2/3 of the Eastern Roman army had now been destroyed, and it's unknown how many of the Germans were lost. Many cite the Battle of Adrianople to be the start of the fall of Rome. Either way, it would weaken the empire significantly. Rome would never fully recover, and this defeat led to the Germanic tribes sweeping across Western Europe, shaping it significantly. Rome was unwilling and, some say, unable to deal with this threat, so allowed for the Goths to settle and become self-governing west of the Black Sea in what is now called the Balkans. At this point in time, the empire was also struggling for manpower, and therefore relied much more on tribal forces, with many of the Germanic peoples rising in the ranks of the Roman Empire, many of them becoming great generals. The Goths in particular seemed to thrive in the empire, and rose to some of the highest ranks, although they were still taken advantage of and used by the Romans. A good example of this is the Battle of Frigidus in 394 AD, where the Gothic infantry were used as cannon fodder and recklessly, with many of them dying needlessly. The Catholic Church would also rise to power during this time, with Germanic and Roman pagans facing persecution if they didn't convert. Alaric, a Visigoth general in the Roman army, grew angry at this, and led another rebellion. He proved himself to be a pain in the backside for Rome and the Catholic Church, raiding and pillaging across Greece, and winning a few skirmishes in Italy. In 407, Alaric started raiding Italy once more, but this time was paid off. However, the Roman autocracy were upset for having to foot the bill of this bribe, and plotted to arrest and execute the Roman commander who agreed to it. However, this Roman commander himself was a German, and after his execution, many German warriors who were now stationed around Italy to protect it, joined Alaric. Alaric pressed his advantage and marched towards Rome, his numbers growing as he marched from Roman German warriors and German slaves joining him. Alaric sieged Rome in 408 and 409, and after negotiations broke down, he sacked the city. This was the first time Rome had been sacked since 390 BC. Rome was robbed and looted, and in 410 AD, Alaric died from disease. Be sure to check out my other channel, History Sticks, for the complete, longer, and comprehensive video.